Hello, my name is Titus Underwood. I am Nashville Symphony's principal oboist, and I would like to thank Rebecca for inviting me to be a part of this series. The name of my project is Lift Every Voice. Lift Every Voice and Sing was written in 1899 by NAACP leader at the time, James Weldon Johnson, and then it was later set to music by John Rosamond Johnson. This had later become to be known as the Black Negro National Anthem. This is something that's sang in churches, sung amongst many black groups here in the States and other cultural backgrounds of people who just resonate with the song itself. But it is known as the Black National Anthem. How this project came into being was I asked a few of my colleagues, kind of an all-star cast of black players here. We wanted to put up something online with a Strauss serenade, actually, at first, to show black players in the United States and abroad, to show the representation that there are black players in orchestras. So I called some of my friends like Anthony McGill, who's principal clarinet, the New York Philharmonic, his brother, Damari McGill, who's in Seattle Symphony, and Andrew Brady, who's principal of Atlanta Symphony, and et cetera, et cetera. So as we started to put together this piece, I then asked Fredo, could you please write us an arrangement of Lift Every Voice and Sing? He agreed. And when he got it back to me, I was like, this is it. We have to do this. But we were still set to play the Strauss first because that was the first thing that we were working on. Everyone knew it. So it was a lot easier to put together. Then the murder of George Floyd happened. And prior to that, Breonna Taylor. And also Ahmaud Arbery here in the States. This caused for the Lift Every Voice to become something a lot deeper than us just coming together and playing and showing black representation. But then it became more of a political statement and a protest through art and music, and that's what we do best. So when the Lift Every Voice was recorded, it was actually recorded a month before George Floyd and all the protests happened. So this was already just sitting in a Dropbox waiting to be done, but it was just playing. It wasn't with pictures or with any sort of narration that went along with it. So once I had the idea of it being more of a protest, I started to put together pictures and thinking the way it should be put together and how we can make this more of a political statement than just black players playing together. It can be both and. So then I worked with one of my friends, Enrico, who is the video editor, who helped me put together the video itself and cut up audio, make sure we all synced up. I started to kind of direct the vision of how I wanted this to look. And after it all came together, I knew that this was what needed to be said at the time. And it turned out to be a very beautiful piece that I'm very proud of. And I'm proud of my colleagues and all the people who made this happen. Thank you, Fredo. Thank you to all my colleagues who are part of it, played it. Thank you, Enrico, for your editing. And thank you, Rebecca, for letting me share this with your audience. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed working on it. And I hope that it touches you as much as it touches me. Here's Lift Every Voice. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Samantha Ege. It's an honour to be invited by the African Concert Series in London to talk about my research on the composer Florence Price. About 10 years ago, when I was a foreign exchange student at McGill University in Canada, I was introduced to Florence Price, the first African-American woman to achieve national and international success as a composer. Her Fantasy Negre in E minor was the piece that changed everything. Up until this point, I didn't know of any women of African descent in classical music. But that bold opening E minor chord, followed by a romantic cascade of notes into a lower melody that quotes the Negro spiritual, "Sinner, please don't let this harvest pass," told me that there was a deeper history here. I recently completed my PhD on Florence Price at the University of York. But around the beginning of my studies, I became aware that I had inadvertently absorbed the subliminal, that Black women's achievements in classical music were an isolated phenomenon. Without realizing, I'd put Florence Price on a pedestal as if her ambition was the exception and not the rule. But as my research deepened, a whole community emerged around her. A community of women who wrote about her music, sponsored her performances, helped her meet contest deadlines, and gave her a place to stay when her marriage collapsed. And Florence Price coached and inspired the next generation of composers and collaborated with many female practitioners, one of whom was Marian Anderson. Here she is on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1939 in front of 75,000 people and a radio audience in the millions. She sang the music of Florence Price for the world to hear. This is Margaret Bonds, a child prodigy and student of Florence Price, whose own creative style was heavily influenced by her mentor. My research into these women presents their interconnectivity as a form of strategic sisterhood. What you're about to hear now is a medley that begins with the Florence Price song that Marian Anderson sang on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The song is called "My Soul's Been Anchored in the Lord." I continue the spiritual overtones with a piece by Margaret Bonds called "The Bells." This is how their sisterhood sounds. Around 2 years ago, I recorded Florence Price's Sonata in E minor on my debut album with Wave Theory Records. The sonata is, again, imbued with deeper histories that evoke both African and American geographies, sound worlds of the antebellum South, and visions of a modern identity. As a musicologist, I really enjoy unfolding Price's narrative against her social and cultural landscape, but it's as a pianist that I really get to bring her musical world to life. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to the African Concert Series.
I'm Kamilla Arku. I am a pianist based in London, UK, currently locking down in Berlin, Germany. I'm also the founder and director of Music for Liberia, a non-profit which raises money for children and education in Liberia through music events in the UK. In all of my work, I am committed to promoting diversity in the arts and to using music to celebrate the achievements of marginalized communities all around the world. So I am thrilled to be taking part in the African Concert Series and to be sharing one of my favorite works for piano, Troubled Water by the prolific pianist and composer Margaret Bonds. Bonds was one of the first Black American composers to gain national recognition, and today is remembered for her frequent collaborations with Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes and American soprano Leontine Price. Troubled Water, first published in 1967, is her take on the spiritual Wade in the Water. Wade in the Water is of special significance to Black Americans because it's one of the coded songs which helped guide slaves from the South to the free North. Wade in the Water was an instruction to throw off slave catchers by avoiding the trails and using streams and rivers to travel north to safety.
Hello, this is John McLaughlin Williams, conductor, violinist, composer, and arranger. It's a privilege to be featured on the African Concert Series, and I want to thank Rebecca Elmordia for inviting me to do so. She's asked me to give a brief introduction of the music that's going to be played. William Grant Still's Here's One is a setting of a spiritual, very famous spiritual. William Grant Still was one of America's great composers. He wrote in all forms, large and small, and he was the first composer of African descent to have a symphony and an opera performed by major orchestras and companies. This particular spiritual setting was originally written for solo voice, and later he made a version for choir. His great friend Louis Kaufman, a virtuoso violinist and concertmaster of one of the Hollywood film orchestras, heard it and decided to make a violin transcription of it. And when you hear it, you can see why. It's an extraordinarily intense arrangement. It creates a very rapt atmosphere that results in something of almost a kind of a very still religious ecstasy. It's extraordinarily beautiful, and the words really tell the tale. And the words go like this. Talk about a child that do love Jesus. Here's one. Here's one. Talk about a child done been converted. Here's one. Here's one. Ever since I heard the gospel story, I've been walking up the road to glory. Talk about a child that do love Jesus. Here's one. Here's one. So you can almost hear the music through the cadence of the words, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So thanks very much. Enjoy William Grant Still's Here's One. You're about to hear the finale from Florence Price's Symphony No. 3. It was written between 1938 and 1940 as a result of a commission from the Works Projects Administration. The WPA was an agency at the Roosevelt administration that was meant to put people to work during the Great Depression. And though it was primarily focused on public works projects, it actually went far beyond that. And it employed a lot of musicians and arts professionals in various aspects. It was quite a boon at the time. I think perhaps we need a worldwide WPA after all this is said and done. Anyway, not to digress, but the movement itself is something of a scherzo that hints at sonata form but has no second theme. So I'd say the best way to enjoy it is to sit back and just enjoy the rollicking ride that Price takes you on. So, Florence Price's finale from the Third Symphony. Thanks.
I met H. Leslie Adams, and the H is for Harrison, when I was collaborating with my friend Daryl Taylor. At the time he was a tenor and we were performing at Wild Recital Hall. And Leslie approached me saying that he was writing some etudes for piano and asked me if I would like to play them, and of course I said yes. So I recorded the first 12 for Albany. They were our 26. He conceived of them as being 26, and he worked on them from early in his career. The first few date from the 1950s, and I think he finished them around 2010, somewhere in there. So the G-flat major is a beautiful rippling piece that also has a middle section that is very soulful and has characteristic harmonies and rhythms that Leslie returns to over and over. Just a word on the etudes themselves. Leslie said that they were etudes mainly of mood and maybe not so much for technical challenges. He does have an octave etude, and he does have some others that would make that not entirely true. But this particular piece, with its harp-like figures, is a really beautiful example of the etude as concert piece. Viola Kinney's only extant composition is Mother's Sacrifice. It was composed in 1908 and published in 1909. It was a prize winner in the Interstate Literary Society's composition competition and is also available in Hildegard's collection of music by Black women composers from 1893 to 1990. She was from Sedalia, Missouri. She moved away to go to school, moved back, got married, and for all we know, that was the last she ever composed. But I hope you enjoy this gem of a piece.